Okay, so now we're going to talk about sort of the structure of this web viewer object and how we can use some of the classes on it to add our own custom behaviors. So we talked about how the web viewer is the topmost object. Now there's a number of different subsystems or components in Communicator that you're going to interact with. So for example, we listed a couple here. We have a selection manager. So for example, everything having to do with selection will be in the selection manager class. We have a model, which will be your gateway to interacting with things like the model hierarchy. So if you want to find out, like, what is the name of a particular node, or what are the children of a particular node, all that information is going to be in methods on model. The view handles everything with camera-related things. So if you want to change the camera or change the way certain objects are visible, like for example, we want to hide or show lines or change the rendering mode, all that is set on the view. Now we can take a quick look here at the docs, and we can kind of see all of these the different methods on the web viewer. So some of the big ones that we have view, we have markup manager here, which handles all of the markup related items. Cutting plane manager handles cutting. Explosion manager for everything relating to explosion of parts. Measurement. So by using this, page here, you can kind of see all of the different components that make up the web viewer. And then we also have a few other things I do want to point out while we're just kind of at the high level web viewer. One of the big ones is the callbacks, which we're going to talk more in detail about, but this is for setting callbacks on the web viewer as a whole. Things like taking a snapshot of the current screen, or that's on the web viewer object. You can also trigger your own custom events. Like if you made a custom operator and you wanted to trigger your own event for that, you can trigger an event. So this is sort of your first stop, and then you can dive into each particular component to see the specialized functionality. But the web viewer is the main entry point. Okay, so now that we've talked about sort of these main components, we're going to shift into callbacks. Now, callbacks are one way, along with the custom operators, of adding in your own functionality to Communicator. So a lot of times, people will have an existing application that they're moving to the web, or some particular workflow that they want to support. And there's two ways to accomplish that. One is to write your own operator to do that, or one is to hook into callbacks. And callbacks allow you to make use of the functionality we've already built into Communicator. And there's nothing really special about our callbacks. They're just like any other callback system you probably use in a number of different libraries. So you register a callback. Each callback has a handle, essentially describing when it's going to be called, and a function that will be called when that happens. So, for example, one thing, so maybe you're making markups or red lines, and you want to save those off into your database. We have a callback that fires every time one of those is made, so you can get that markup item and you can save it off to your own server. Or you can get callbacks when the model is switched. So maybe if you think back to the example of the distributor that had the moto and maintained different quantities for each part, you could hook up the callback to model switched, and maybe they switched to a different bike, and you would reload the quantity data from your server for this new model. So things of that nature where you have this generic operation such as a view being updated or a camera changing or a part being selected, that you don't need to customize the actual functionality. You can use a callback just to respond to that event and update your UI or pull extra data from your server or anything really that you can think of that you want to do. So we talked about callbacks. Now we can talk about operators a little bit, because we're going to talk about making our own custom operators, but just so we have an idea of how operators work. So the way operators work in Communicator is they operate on a stack. So you can have multiple operators active at once, and every time an event triggers, such as a mouse move or a click, we're going to walk down that stack so that every operator has a chance to react to that. So this allows you to kind of combine different functionalities. So for example, our cutting plane, our default cutting plane, is just an operator that sits, our cutting plane operator sits on the stack, and every time cutting planes are active, it will see if, when you click, if you've clicked on a cutting plane. If so, it'll start the logic for dragging that cutting plane. But that also works with the selection manager, so if you select something that's not a cutting plane, the cutting plane operator won't act on it. So this allows you to provide a separation of logic between different operators that do different things. So you can write an operator that does one specific thing, put it on the stack, and then it'll get a chance to react to those different events and either choose to do something or not. And you can stop propagation of events when you handle these different functions. So for example, on like the mouse down, if your custom operator does some function, you can say stop propagating, and the system won't send any more events down the stack. So that allows you to kind of get first shot at these events. And then you can also set mappings on operators so that basically what buttons they work on. So this set mapping is something that we provide for our operators. So if you wanted to say maybe the camera pans on the left button, you can change that mapping. If you make your own operators, then you would have to implement that yourself, but this is just a convention that our operators have to allow you to change the buttons. Because maybe your particular users may be used to like dragging with the left button or dragging with the right button. So the set mapping is just a way for you to customize that behavior. Okay, so further configuration that we can talk about is setting different colors. So for example, the background color you can set. Here we make a gradient. This sets a solid color of just white, but you could make these colors different and it'll make a gradient from top to bottom. So this shows how we do the different gradients. So you just make a new color object, and for the top and the bottom, and when you call set background color, you can see we interpolate from the top to the bottom. One thing to note also, you can make transparent backgrounds. So if you wanted your viewer to float on top of something, you can set, if you set a color to null, it'll be transparent. So we talked about setting the mapping of operators. This just shows another example using the operator manager to set that mapping.